This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
China and the European Union prepare a massive investment deal. The leader of Mali's military junta heads to Ghana as ECOWAS calls for a civilian-led transition. And a group of visually impaired musicians prepare for a return to concerts after a 6-month break. Hello and a warm welcome to Africa Live on CGTN. I'm Lindy Mtongana in Nairobi. Also coming up this hour. Ethiopia commissions a factory to produce COVID-19 testing kits. And how Ethiopia's Grand Renaissance Dam could be helping to mitigate threats of flooding downstream of the Nile River. In our top story this hour, China and the European Union say a massive investment deal will be ready within this year. A virtual summit on Monday gathered leaders from both sides, among them Chinese President Xi Jinping, German Chancellor Angela Merkel and other EU leaders. The two sides also signed a deal to enhance trade in agricultural goods. Here's Victor Ning with the details.
Trade and cooperation are the main focus at Monday's summit. China and Europe reached agreements on key issues. The two sides agreed to finish talks this year on an investment treaty that began in 2013. A deal on geographical indication was also signed. It protects hundreds of food and alcohol products with specific geographical origins or qualities related to that origin. And the leaders decided to set up more channels of communication to expand environmental and digital cooperation. As for future relations, President Xi proposed 4 principles: peaceful coexistence, openness and cooperation, multilateralism, and dialogue and consultation. He said a coexistence of multiple civilizations should be the norm, and China is committed to the international order with the United Nations at the core. When it comes to trade and investment, Xi Jinping said China and Europe could use policies to unleash more potential. He noted the two sides have carried out effective anti-epidemic cooperation, and he expected both sides to keep global supply chains stable and to contribute to an economic recovery. He also said once available, COVID-19 vaccines should become global public goods. For their part, the European leaders said it's imperative to jointly resist unilateralism and protectionism and to respond more effectively to various global challenges. They also expressed willingness to work with China in international organizations, defend free trade, and promote an economic recovery in Europe and beyond. Victor Ning, CGTN.
During the meeting, President Xi Jinping also clarified China's position on both the Hong Kong and Xinjiang-related concerns. He said China will safeguard its national sovereignty, security and unity and protect the rights of people of all ethnic groups. He also said China firmly opposes any person or force creating instability or division in China and opposes meddling in its internal affairs. Xi said there is no one-size-fits-all path to human rights development and China will not accept double standards. Foreign Minister Wang Yi reiterated the importance of the One China principle during his visit to Europe last month. Meanwhile, American officials have confirmed they've received a bid by tech giant Oracle to become TikTok's business partner in the United States. CGTN's Nathan King has more from the White House.
The clock is ticking here in the US over the forced sale of social media sensation TikTok's US operations, after US President Trump set a deadline of September 15th, and over the weekend there was a flurry of corporate activity. The result? TikTok's Chinese parent ByteDance announced leading bidder Microsoft is out, data storage and software giant Oracle is in. Oracle says it will serve as the, quote, trusted technology partner of TikTok in the US. Walmart, meanwhile, had partnered with Microsoft on the bid, but now says it may switch to Oracle in a bid to deal with ByteDance. The US Treasury Secretary announced that the White House deadline is now September 20th, not the 15th, and they will be examining the deal over the coming days.
It's going to go through a national security review in the next couple of days, and then we'll be sitting down and reviewing it with the president. But as we've said before, a condition of any deal is to make sure that we believe that the code is safe, that U.S. citizens' personal data is safe, and that the phones are safe.
The plan seems to be storing TikTok user data from the US on Oracle's cloud servers. But the Trump administration isn't calling all the shots here. China's new export controls cover proprietary artificial intelligence algorithms, and CGTN reporting suggests that Beijing regulators may not back any deal with a US company. China's Ministry of Foreign Affairs had this to say.
On one hand, some U.S. politicians are preaching the ideals of achieving fairness and equality and building a so-called clean network. On the other hand, without any evidence at all, they generalize the concept of national security and abuse state power to purposelessly coerce and unjustifiably crack down on non-American enterprises that have taken the lead in particular fields.
Whether Beijing would accept a minority stake in TikTok from Oracle is as yet unclear, as both governments are currently studying the proposed deal. What is clear is that TikTok is a highly sought-over asset here in the US. With 100 million users, it's very valuable. And the battle over this forced sale has attracted the biggest names in US technology. No financial details, however, have been disclosed. What may help this proposed forced sale is the fact that US President Donald Trump and the founder and largest shareholder of Oracle, Larry Ellison, are close friends. Larry Ellison has raised funds for US President Trump, and the current CEO of Oracle has served on the president's transition team. The US President spoke just 2 weeks ago, saying that he was open to a tie-up between Oracle and TikTok. Nathan King, CGTN at the White House.
The U.S. ban on chip supplies to Huawei takes effect today. The Chinese telecom giant has been at the center of a long-running standoff between China and the United States. Now, due to the U.S. restrictions, TSMC, the largest contract chip maker in the world, had already stopped processing new orders from Huawei due to those restrictions. Qualcomm, SK Hynix, Samsung and LG have also stopped supplying panels for premium smartphones to Huawei. The smartphone company, their OLED driver chips are now being phased out, but Huawei is accelerating the speed of developing its own product components. Washington accuses the Chinese company of posing a security threat, allegations Huawei has denied. Now, this year, the United Nations is marking 75 years since it was first established in the aftermath of World War II. Secretary General Antonio Guterres is due to address the annual General Assembly next week. Some 170 world leaders are expected to make video statements during that week-long meeting. Now, one of the main issues on the agenda is a call for warring nations to put down their weapons and support a global truce. The initiative is aimed at uniting the world in the global fight against the coronavirus pandemic. Guterres says a global ceasefire would boost attempts to contain COVID-19 and foster conditions for a coordinated, sustainable and inclusive recovery from the virus. The UN initially called for a global truce earlier in March. Around the world, there have now been nearly 30 million COVID-19 infections and over 900,000 deaths.
My first priority is the implementation of the global ceasefire. And there are some positive signals. We had the peace agreement in Sudan. We have now the political talks in Afghanistan. On the other hand, if one looks at the most difficult confrontations, be it in Syria, be it in Libya, be it in Ukraine, you have standstills, you have ceasefires declared or non-declared that are more or less holding. And in Yemen, there are very intense negotiations to see if we can reach a global ceasefire, a set of confidence-building measures, and the restart of political talks. So there are signals of hope, but we need to mobilize the whole of the international community to make this global ceasefire be a reality until the end of the year.
Now, today marks the deadline set by West African leaders for the naming of a civilian president and prime minister who will lead Mali's transitional government. The head of Mali's military junta, Colonel Assimi Goïta, is expected in Ghana to meet the presidents of the regional body ECOWAS. The gathering is expected to address Mali's ongoing political transition. Late last week, the junta emerged with its own charter that has a set transition period of 18 months as opposed to an earlier suggested period of 3 years. The charter also says the transitional government could be led by either a military or civilian leader. Mali's opposition party, the M5 RFP coalition, has strongly opposed the charter, saying that a civilian as president is what the Malian people want. Well, for more details on this, we're now joined by our correspondent, Nabil Rafai, based in Accra. Nabil, the leader of Mali's military junta, expected to travel to Ghana. What is the latest on this?
Indeed, we understand that the military leader, Colonel Assimi Goïta, has arrived here in Ghana. We are told that he arrived last night, and today this particular meeting of ECOWAS leaders is expected to make a presentation to the leaders that have gathered here. We know that 12 leaders out of the 15 member states of ECOWAS have actually come for this all-important meeting, which is going to discuss the political future of Mali. So yes, the army leader, Colonel Goïta, is in Ghana, and we expect him to be making some presentations at this particular meeting.
Now, of course, plenty at stake when it comes to this meeting, as of course today marking the deadline set by ECOWAS for Mali's coup leaders to name a civilian-led transitional government. Do we expect that there will be consensus emerging from this meeting between ECOWAS leaders and those military junta leaders?
Well, that remains to be seen. The meeting of these ECOWAS states leaders and the army leader of Mali, Colonel Assimi Goïta, is expected to start any moment from now. We know that ECOWAS has already taken some sanctions against Mali, where it has cut some financial transfers to the country, and also all the ECOWAS states have closed their borders to Mali and impressed on the military to designate a civilian leader to head the transitional period, which is 1 year until an election is done. As to whether this army leader is going to accept this alternative is what we are going to find out at the end of this particular meeting. But then we know that ECOWAS has said if an agreement is not reached, further sanctions would be imposed on Mali, aside the already sanctions that have been given to them in terms of the cut of the financial transfers to the country and also the closure of the borders of all the ECOWAS states. If the leader is able to accept to appoint or to designate a civilian leader to oversee the transition within the 1 year period before the elections are held, then we know that these sanctions may be lifted. So we are waiting to see the outcome of this important meeting by the ECOWAS leaders and also with the Mali army leader, Colonel Assimi Goïta.
Nabil Ahmed Rufai, thank you so much, live there with us from Accra, Ghana, where that ECOWAS meeting is set to take place. Now, moving to political issues in Cote d'Ivoire, the country's top court has granted President Alassane Ouattara permission to seek a contentious third term in office. The decision comes as the Electoral Commission bars ex-Prime Minister Guillaume Soro from running in the October 31st presidential vote. CGTN's Joy Kiruki has more.
The decision by the court to clear President Ouattara to run for a third term sparked protests in several cities in Cote d'Ivoire. The protest turned violent as fears grew of a repeat of the conflict that claimed 3,000 lives a decade ago. So far, around 15 people have died in violence since Ouattara, 78, announced in August that he would run for a third term. The constitution limits presidents to 2 terms. Ouattara argues, though, that a 2016 constitutional tweak reset the clock. The president had initially vowed not to run for a third term, but changed his mind after the sudden death of his preferred successor, his prime minister, in July. 86-year-old Henry Conan Bedi, who is seeking to return to the presidency after he was ousted in the country's first coup in 1999, has termed Ouattara's tilt as a violation of the constitution. The Constitutional Council has cleared only 4 out of the 44 candidates for the October 31 presidential poll. Some of those barred from the race include former President Laurent Gbagbo and former rebel leader turned Prime Minister Guillaume Soro. The Electoral Commission had announced that anyone convicted of a crime will be disqualified from running for the top office. The court handed Gbagbo a 20-year jail term in absentia. He was charged with looting of the local branch of the Central Bank of West African States during the 2010-2011 crisis.
The candidacy file of Mr. Gbagbo Loro does not comply with the provisions of Article 48, 50 and 51 of the Electoral Code and must therefore be declared inadmissible.
Soro, on the other hand, was barred after he was sentenced in April to 20 years in prison for concealment of embezzlement of public funds.
The candidacy of Mr. Soro Kickback Fori Guam is declared inadmissible.
Several requests filed by Soro's lawyers over the past week to try to allow him stand in the election have received a no from the Electoral Commission. All eyes will now be on the Electoral Commission on whether it will stand firm or budge as the election draws near. Joy Kiruki Juma, CGTN.
Well, time now for a short break. Here's what's still ahead on the program. How Ethiopia's Grand Renaissance Dam could be helping to mitigate threats of flooding downstream of the Nile River. And a health startup in Nigeria rolls out medical insurance that could see millions pay less for malaria treatment.
This has taken me completely out of my depth, but at the same time it's exciting. It's new, it's different, it's a challenge.
It's really exciting.
Sudan's government is calling for more international aid for victims of the worst flooding the country has seen in decades. At least 106 people have died and the homes of more than 500,000 people have been submerged. CGTN's Patrick Oyet has more.
Sudan's government has declared a state of emergency in the country due to devastating flooding that is sweeping through 17 states. Sudan's Khartoum, Blue Nile and River Nile states are among the hardest hit. The government says the water levels are the highest since 1988 and thousands of people are in need of shelter, household items, water, sanitation and food. More than 111,000 houses have been destroyed. The flooding also damaged 179 public facilities and killed a number of livestock. Khartoum is asking for support from international partners. The United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, Qatar and Egypt have now sent humanitarian aid to Sudan, and Egypt says it is committed to helping Sudan's transitional government to stabilize the country.
We affirm Egypt's support, and the timing, of course, cannot be better. The timing is very opportune given the pressures and the challenges and repercussions of the coronavirus pandemic.
Sudanese authorities dug trenches to try and reduce water levels, but it is not helping much. Sudan's rainy season begins in June until October, and there are warnings that this weather is set to continue. The worry is that without more help, there will simply even be more devastation and deaths. Patrick Oyet, CGTN, Juba, South Sudan.
Meanwhile, heavy rainfall in East Africa is also affecting parts of Ethiopia. More than 1 million people in the country are in need of help. Ethiopian authorities say the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam may have helped some downstream areas of the Nile River avoid further disaster. Here's CGTN's Girum Chala with more.
This year, the rains in the Nile basin seem to be unprecedented. Experts say the Ethiopian highlands haven't seen such rain in about a century.
The rains we have seen in Ethiopia this year were last seen perhaps 100 years ago. This is called 100 years return period in scientific terms.
The rains have also affected Sudan and Egypt, two other countries which the Nile River runs through. In Sudan, flooding has killed over 100 people and damaged tens of thousands of houses. Ethiopia says the Grand Renaissance Dam reservoir has helped Sudan avoid further catastrophe.
The existence of the Grand Renaissance Dam without a doubt has helped Sudan. Imagine if another 5 billion cubic meters of water was added to the floods in Sudan. One can only imagine the kind of disaster that would have been if that much water had not been held behind.
The heavy rain has not spared other regions in Ethiopia. In the Afar and Oromia regions, more than 1.2 million people have been affected by serious flooding. The Ministry of Peace said help is being provided for the affected.
We have to continue assisting flood-affected citizens in our country. The government is delivering all-round support for people evicted due to the heavy flooding. A lot of preventive works have also been done, which by and large has helped avoid death and more material destruction. But we can admit in some places the damage done was beyond our prediction.
Countries through which the Nile River pass are advised to strengthen their flood prediction and prevention works in order to avoid any possible loss of lives or properties due to sudden flooding. Experts also say nations must work hand in hand in exchange of information and mitigation strategies. Grumtara CGTN, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
In Kenya, schools have been closed since March due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Children who depended on schools for meals have lost that access. But a non-profit organization has been working to keep supporting children with nutritious lunches. CGTN's Tuli Shabalala has more.
This is the lunch distribution point of Food for Education. The non-profit organization provides nutritious lunches to primary school students from low-income families. Wawira Njiru started the feeding initiative in 2012. But since the outbreak of the coronavirus pandemic, she has been even more determined to scale up the project and reach more hungry stomachs.
It's really critical that children continue getting the right nutrition. Growing and eating doesn't stop because of a pandemic, and you can't social distance on an empty stomach. So we're ensuring that these children and their families are able to stay safe. We've been providing food packages and hot meals from our first initial kitchen. That has reached over 10,000 children and their families.
Vincent Mkuviza is a Class 5 student in Kenya's Kiambu County. He is now one of 10,000 children who benefit from this initiative outside of school.
When schools were open, things were very good. I feel bad because the schools are now closed. If the school reopens, I would work hard in studying. This food has helped me a lot because my mom doesn't have enough money to buy us food. So this food is very helpful to us.
The organization offers the children wristbands called Tap to Eat. The wristbands are linked to a virtual wallet that parents top up using their smartphones. The children pay 92 cents for each meal, while 14 cents is subsidized by the organization.
During this COVID-19 outbreak, this program has really helped me a lot to feed my children because I don't have money to buy them food. The school informed us that they will provide the lunch meal for children this time of corona. I have never heard them complain that the food is bad. They always tell me that the food is good.
Recently, Food for Education launched their second central kitchen, which has the capacity of providing 1,000 meals on a daily basis.
We're looking at building another kitchen that will feed 50,000 kids with a goal of reaching 1 million kids a day by 2025. So our expectation now is that we continue to grow and continue to feed more kids, building more central kitchens like this, using technology to be able to feed the future of Kenya and of Africa.
Hopefully, once schools reopen, they will be able to enroll more children. Thuli Shabalala, CGTN.
Ugandan police have arrested 26 suspects in connection with violent clashes at Rhino refugee settlement that have left 10 people dead. The violence started when a member of the host community was injured by a group of South Sudanese refugees. CGTN's Hilary Ayesiga reports.
Tension remains high at Rhino refugee settlement, northwestern Uganda. This follows clashes between the host community and some refugees over the weekend.
It so happened that one of the residents called Ajutera Rahman Yassin was grazing animals near the Rhino Camp refugee settlement, and it was during that process that he got into a conflict with a group of youth from the Rhino Camp refugee settlement who violently assaulted him.
The incident triggered a revenge attack from the host community. 10 people were killed and 3 others sustained injuries. Ugandan police have now moved in to restore calm.
The operations were massive to the extent of having all 26 people, including the major perpetrators, arrested. So calm has been restored.
Rhino Camp is a major settlement near the border with South Sudan, accommodating more than 100,000 refugees. Local authorities have now tightened security at the refugee settlement as refugee leaders and local authorities push for dialogue. Hilary Ayesiga, CGTN, Kampala, Uganda.
In Nigeria, an e-health startup has been expanding an insurance service that could see millions pay less for malaria treatment. The World Health Organization says Nigeria alone accounts for 1/4 of global malaria deaths. These deaths are mainly attributed to inadequate access to affordable treatment. Our correspondent Phil Ihaza reports from the nation's capital, Abuja.
Sunday Akinsanya feels feverish and he suspects he has malaria. But he's not too worried because he and his family have signed up since April for a private telemedicine insurance platform known as Wella Health.
I just spoke to a doctor now, so he have directed me to a pharmacy. So I'm going there right now to get tested and get my medication. I've been using their service for over time, so I know definitely I will get well soon.
With a monthly subscription of just $1, subscribers can access online consultations, rapid testing and medication for malaria. This is one of Wella Health's verified pharmacies. A quick test shows Sunday is positive for malaria. He is then given his medication without having to pay out of pocket. More than 80 million Nigerians live in extreme poverty and can't afford to pay for tests or malaria, which usually costs around $6. The coronavirus pandemic has also been impacting the fight against malaria and has overburdened the country's health sector. The Wella Health team says the idea behind this service is to reduce the burden of malaria on national health facilities.
We are taking the burden off general hospitals, teaching hospitals, so we are handling malaria. Malaria is not something that you really need to go to most of these government hospitals, so we are trying to make it easier for them, and we are also taking the burden off or actually helping primary health care centers, because this is something primary health care centers can do.
Experts say many are unable to afford the cost of data for telemedicine, and the likes of Wella Health will need to create more affordable platforms as well as sensitize people in rural areas on the benefits of health insurance services.
There is a lack of synergy between people being aware of the health insurance and people bringing their intent registering to having a policy with the health insurance. So this is where the challenge is, and it needs to be looked into. Majority are below the poverty level, so they may not see the reason why they should get a policy of health insurance.
The team says with more support from the government, they are hoping to reach more people in rural areas by expanding their current network of 1,000 community pharmacies and making their telemedicine service more flexible for low-income individuals.
Study shows that malaria accounts for a lot of work hours lost in countries like Nigeria, where the burden is high. The hope is that efforts by private health initiatives will go a long way to complement the government's efforts in reducing malaria diseases to the barest minimum so as to ensure a more productive society. Phil Ihaza, CGTN, Abuja.
Let's recap your top stories this hour. China and the European Union say a massive investment deal will be ready within the year. A virtual summit on Monday gathered leaders from both sides, among them Chinese President Xi Jinping, German Chancellor Angela Merkel, and other EU leaders. Today marks the deadline set by West African states for the naming of a civilian president and prime minister. The head of Mali's junta, Colonel Assimi Goïta, is expected in Ghana to meet the presidents of the regional body ECOWAS. Late last week, the junta set a transition period of 18 months. And this year, the United Nations is marking 75 years since it was first established in the aftermath of World War II. Secretary General Antonio Guterres is due to virtually address the annual General Assembly next week. Some 170 world leaders are also expected to make video statements during that week-long meeting. And here's what's coming up in your business news. Ethiopia commissions a factory to produce COVID-19 testing kits. And U.S. oil and chemical companies push Kenya to drop restrictions on plastics as the two countries negotiate a trade deal.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
In your business news, Sudan's annual inflation accelerated to 166.83% in August. That's up from 143.7% in July. The State Statistics Office attributed this to a rise in food and transportation prices. The country's economy has struggled to recover since neighboring South Sudan seceded back in 2011 with the bulk of the region's oil wealth. Economic deterioration and a rise in the prices of basic goods led to the ouster of former President Omar al-Bashir in April last year. Besides food, the country has witnessed a rise in the price of oil as well as dollars in the black market. And last week, the transitional government declared a state of emergency after the Sudanese pound continued in a sharp fall in what the authorities called a systematic operation to vandalize the economy. Ethiopia has commissioned a factory to produce coronavirus testing kits as it scales up efforts to halt the deadly pandemic. The lab will be able to produce 10 million kits per year. The kits will be used in the country and exported too, with priority given to other African nations. From Addis Ababa, here's CGTN's Girum Chala.
Located in the outskirts of the capital Addis Ababa, at the Bole Lummi Industrial Park, Ethiopia's COVID-19 test kit manufacturing facility is said to be a game changer in the country's efforts to combat the disease. The company producing the testing kit is a joint venture with a Chinese company called BGI Health Ethiopia. Upon commissioning the factory, Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed explained the importance of producing test kits locally to help boost the country's testing capacity.
As we had promised, the COVID-19 test kits will now be manufactured in Ethiopia. As you can see here, it's written "Made in Ethiopia." It's a result of the work done between the Ethiopian government and BGI company.
The factory will produce 10 million test kits per year, and according to the Prime Minister, beyond domestic consumption, Ethiopia will soon start exporting the test kits to the rest of the continent. Most African states have been struggling with a shortage of testing kits, ventilators, and intensive care beds.
With 10 million kits production capacity, the output of this factory will serve not only Ethiopia but also the rest of Africa. It's well known that in Africa the number of countries which produce test kits or even with a capacity of test labs is small. Therefore, after satisfying our needs, we will start exporting to our brothers and sisters across the continent.
The joint project between Ethiopia and the Chinese-owned company also aims at opening more COVID-19 testing laboratories across Addis Ababa, including at the Bole International Airport to target transit passengers.
There are more than 2 million transit passengers who pass through our airport every year. Through this project, we'd like to build more labs and use the challenges brought by coronavirus as an advantage to earn the much-needed hard currency.
Upon containment of the COVID-19 pandemic, the manufacturing center will switch to the production of other types of nucleic acid detection reagents. These include AIDS testing kits, tuberculosis nucleic acid test kits, and other locally needed RT-PCR test kit products. So far, Ethiopia has conducted more than 1.2 million COVID-19 tests. Only South Africa and Morocco beat that number in the continent. But with the better availability of test kits because of the new factory, the country aspires to test more number of people daily, which experts say is an important step to defeat the spread of the pandemic. Grumjala CGTN, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
Big oil and chemical companies are reportedly trying to get the U.S. government to pressure Kenya into dropping its plastic waste restrictions. This as Washington and Nairobi negotiate a new trade deal. Giles Gibson reports from the U.S. Capitol.
A group of the biggest oil and chemical companies in the world, including Shell, Exxon and DuPont, reportedly has big plans for Kenya. An affiliate of the environmental organization Greenpeace, called Unearthed, has obtained documents from the American Chemistry Council, or ACC. In a letter to the U.S. Trade Representative's office, the ACC says Kenya could serve as a hub to sell chemical and plastic products to the rest of the continent. Environmental groups fear Kenya could be pressured into walking back restrictions on plastic waste as it tries to seal a trade deal with the US. The ACC says any deal won't override Kenya's domestic approach, but there's also mounting concern about the influence of lobbying groups on US environmental policy.
These industry groups have taken over the Environmental Protection Agency, so I'm not surprised to see them engaged in international diplomacy. It's illegitimate, it's unfortunate, and hopefully it'll be put to an end.
The Trump administration has launched initiatives like the Trash-Free Waters program to reduce the amount of plastic and other waste that ends up in rivers and oceans. However, the US hasn't ratified the Basel Convention, a United Nations pact that regulates the global trade in plastic waste. According to the Plastic Pollution Coalition, the US is shipping less plastic waste to countries with poor waste management systems than it was, but it still amounts to tens of thousands of shipping containers every year. The Trump administration says its trade deal with Kenya could serve as a model for agreements with other countries in Africa. So whatever Washington and Nairobi agree on US exports of plastic products and waste could shape the approach of countries all over the continent. Giles Gibson for CGTN in Washington.
Nigeria's government says it has finally abolished its long-standing petrol subsidy for good as it embarks on the delayed reforms for its downstream oil sector. The move is expected to save the country as much as $2.6 billion a year as it adopts market-based pricing for its fuel products. But as CGTN's Deji Badmus reports, the decision could put the government on a collision course with labor unions in the country.
Perhaps no subject is as controversial and touchy as petrol subsidy in Nigeria. Almost every past government in the country tried to do away with it, but met strong resistance. And apart from the demand for better pay, perhaps nothing else has made labor unions in the country to embark on strike than the fight to keep the subsidy. Even the current Nigerian president at some point in the past campaigned to keep the subsidy. But Africa's largest economy is now facing a severe revenue shortage as a result of falling oil prices and the COVID-19 pandemic. The government now says keeping the subsidy is no longer tenable.
This subsidy is something that cannot be sustained in perpetuity. It is time for Nigerians to face reality and do the right thing. It is something that is good to do. It is something that our president would like to do so much because of his love for the common man. But is this something that can be sustained in perpetuity?
With its 4 refineries working far below capacity, Nigeria imports the bulk of the petrol it consumes, spending billions of dollars every year in the process. A sizable amount of the subsidized petrol is also smuggled across the borders and sold in neighboring countries where the product costs more. The government now says the removal of the subsidy will not just save the country money, but also attract investments.
With deregulation, it means that refineries can operate commercially. And then you can see a lot more investment in that sector. And it's going to create a lot of opportunities, a lot of jobs for our people.
Manufacturers in the country have supported the policy, but the labor unions have rejected it and are poised for a showdown with the government.
Man has always agreed that the fuel subsidy is not good for the economy. We have seen this in diesel. When diesel was deregulated, it became more easily available. You don't have to think twice. You don't have to go and sleep in a fuel station to get diesel. Also, the price remained largely stable, so you can plan. This is what we believe should happen to all petroleum products.
The only reason why a number of Nigerians oppose the removal of petrol subsidy is because they believe it will cause the price of petroleum products to go up. And that's exactly what we have seen in the past few weeks. But the government and proponents of the policy say eventually prices will come down, especially when full domestic refining begins to take place. Problem is, many here, including the unions, are not swayed by that. Deji Badmus, CGTN, Lagos, Nigeria.
You are watching Africa Live. Here's what's still ahead on the program. Coming up, a group of visually impaired musicians prepare for a return to concerts after a 6-month break.
My name is Regina Mirindlovo, and I have felt the pain of abuse and sexual violence throughout my life as a woman living with albinism. The condition is shrouded in dangerous myths in Africa. I have made a decision to take back my power and fight against those myths through my online talk show, My Voice Albinism, The New Era. In the second episode of this 2-part film, I focus on pulling together my latest show. I faced several challenges with the recent announcement of the COVID virus outbreak. I'm not sure if my guests will show up, but I'm determined to break the silence and use my story to inspire the world.
Hello world, my name is Regina Mary and welcome to another awesome African episode of My Voice Albinism, The New Era.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
In Egypt, the visually impaired female musicians who make up the Al Nur Wal Amal Chamber Orchestra are preparing for a return concert. The concert comes after nearly 6 months off due to the COVID-19 pandemic. The group will be performing at the Manastali Palace on the Nile in Cairo. Yasser Hakim has more.
Maryam El-Nagdi, a violin player, joined the Nur Wal Amal Association for the visually impaired 15 years ago. She lives an hour and a half away from the institute, but still manages to practice once a week. Maryam has her own job now, but when she first arrived, she was still a student.
There is a school in the institute. When we first joined, we learned the Braille. We also took normal classes every morning and earned a degree like any educational school in Egypt. Then there's the music. They pick the talented students who have a musical ear to become members of the music group. I was picked and here I am.
The orchestra is preparing itself for the first concert since Egypt's COVID-19 lockdown 6 months ago.
It's a nice feeling. We used to train constantly together and perform a lot. But the virus kept us at home, away from each other. We are happy because we are all friends and enjoy being together and performing in concerts again.
We've only been back for a month, so we are reviewing the music we already performed before. There's no time to learn new music. It takes a long time with Braille notes, and it's not easy. We are excited but also nervous because we haven't trained for a long time.
The Nur Wal Amal Orchestra was established in 1971 with 15 performers. Now they're 40. They have received worldwide acclaim and performed in more than 24 countries.
The young girls who are still in school level, they study here and we provide them with free food, accommodation and education. The graduated girls are independent in their homes, have other jobs as the music comes more of a hobby for them. We give them monthly salaries in addition to a bonus for every concert and pocket money every time they travel abroad.
It's a one-of-a-kind group, and their achievements are a reflection of the determination and ambitions of its members.
I always push myself to be on a higher level than others. Don't want to be a normal person, want to achieve things. I produced videos for social media on how you should treat visually impaired people. It was a great success.
Indeed, even Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi commemorated Maryam as being a role model for the younger generation. And with the resumption of concerts next week, the journey continues for these talented young women. Yasser Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
And now to our continuing digital safari series in the Masai Mara. Today we follow the giraffes, jackals and buffalo as they enjoy their day under the sun.
Yesterday on CGTN's Digital Safari. Birds were fluttering at sunrise, a cheerful chirp announcing the break of day. Grey-crested cranes and wattle lapwings were living by the philosophy of the early bird catches the worm. Squacco herons getting ready for their migration stood watch in the warming waters. The nocturnals had already begun their roost, hidden behind branches and leaves. In the Masai Mara, the adorable jackal pups playfully darted about, exploring the ins and outs of their territory. Inquisitive behavior creates a bond amongst the young ones and sharpens their hunting skills. A shy serval scanned the perimeter from a dense thicket. The reason for the astute scanning was revealed when 3 little kittens popped their heads out of hiding. Servals are single mothers. Her kittens are born in a lair. To protect them, she will move her offspring frequently to new hiding places. A tower of giraffe were nibbling on the lush green leaves, with one of the females showing off her head that oddly enough had no ossicones. Amidst the trees, the males were necking. These fights establish dominance and aren't usually dangerous. A herd of elephants gracefully made their way towards the forest. They can travel great distances on a daily basis in search of nourishment. The Mara boasts an ever-growing population of these gentle giants. The rock stars in Swalu started their day off with a touch of sunbathing. Meerkats are extremely social. There are few animals on Earth who work this well together. A brightly colored rainbow shield bug wandered amongst the flowers of a blackthorn tree. Seeds from budding flowers are dispersed by various animals and insects, which assists in keeping the ecosystem in a healthy, functioning condition. In the Sabi Sands, buffalo wallowed, bathed, drank, and splashed around in Buffelshoek Dam. Join us every day at 4:30 GMT on CGTN digital platforms for your very own virtual safari through the African wild.
And coming up in your sports news.